if you're always fundraising, which is a tendency in an early stage company, because you're always looking at your runway and going, I wish I had more runway. This is stressful. But to the extent that you can delineate between, I'm focused on science, I'm focused on data, I'm focused on building the company, then get that data in hand and then go, okay, now I'm going to go full steam ahead to fundraise. I'm going to talk to every investor. I'm going to be extremely elegant in how I plan it. I'm going to stage my conversation such that I begin with the least important, get my question and get my sort of flow down, then do the slightly more important. And then by the time I'm pitching the really big investors that I really want, I've already got interest, I've already got momentum, and I'm really in a strong position to have those more challenging conversations. And sort of setting the framework, having a process is key. And then being in a position to actually present something scientifically that's meaningful is sort of the most important thing.
Welcome to the EIT Health Innovators Community Podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories from founders across Europe. My name is Mia, and I'm a board member of Innovators Community and regional coordinator for Ireland and UK.
And my name is Emmanuel, and I'm the UK representative for EIT Health Innovators Community for Ireland and UK.
Welcome to the EIT Health Innovators Community Podcast, where we bring inspiring stories such as yours from all across Europe. So as I said, my name is Mia, and I'm a board member of the Innovators Community and a regional coordinator for Ireland and UK. And together with me, here is Emmanuel.
Hi, my name is Emmanuel. Thank you, Mia. And I'm the UK representative for EIT Health Innovators Community for Ireland and UK. Without further ado, let me introduce our speaker for today. So with a background in biomedical engineering, Jack O'Mara is a co-founder and CEO of Ochre Bio. At Ochre, he has assembled a team of seasoned biotechnology professionals, raised $44 million from Tier 1 global investors, and spearheaded the development of novel RNAi medicines for chronic liver disease using a combination of advanced genomics, machine learning, and human-centric translational models. Pretty impressive. Thank you very much, Jack, for being here.
Very happy to be here, and excellent job on both the pronunciation of my name, which sometimes gets shortened into O'Meara, so nicely done, and on the introduction. You just sold my company for me, so great work.
Thank you very much, Jack. The pleasure is all ours. So I would really like to, we have a lot of questions to ask today. We're really curious to see basically your journey and what Ochre is doing. So I would really like to start with the first question. So I understand that Ochre Bio is focused on developing therapies for liver health challenges. Can you tell us more about the company's mission and how did it come to be?
Yeah, very happy to. And thanks again for making time to chat today. So I know we focus on chronic liver disease. It's one of the top 10 global killers. It's actually the only one that continues to rise unabated, despite, and as a sector, a pharmaceutical sector, we really haven't had much success in developing new treatments for patients who suffer from this indication. In some ways, it's sort of the lesser known of the big diseases. It's maybe slightly stigmatized, and so forth. So anyway, we started the company to really try and address some of the big challenges that have held back the space to date. Like a lot of chronic diseases, liver disease suffers from a sense that we don't have a very good handle on the biology quite yet. A lot of the targets that were trialed before ours didn't really see much efficacy signal. We haven't really figured out exactly how to treat it. So when we got started, we to answer that question or to help solve that problem, we do a lot of what we call deep phenotyping, but in layman's language, it basically means zooming in on the disease process, taking disease tissue samples, zooming in, using new tools like single cell and spatial sequencing to try and understand at a molecular level what's causing the disease to develop and what could be better ways to reverse or to treat it. So that was the first big challenge we set out to address when we started the company. And that was a lot of the work we were doing when we first got started in 2019 and 2020. But the second challenge that liver disease suffers from, and again, not unlike a lot of other chronic diseases, is that the animal models or the preclinical models that have been used traditionally to try and assess the efficacy of medicines or try to study the disease really don't work, or really haven't proven very useful at all in translation. So every fatty liver disease drug that's got into human testing, and there's been hundreds, they all worked beautifully in a mouse and they all fail miserably in a human. So the definition of insanity is continuing to do something you know doesn't tell you much. So when we started the company, we thought, how would you rethink preclinical development for this space? And when we concluded, well, the best model for human disease is human organs and human tissues, and so we focus on liver slices of diseased, actually fresh diseased human tissue, live tissue, and then all the way through to actually recovering organs, so donor organs that couldn't be used for transplant because they were seen to have too much disease, and maintaining them on these new transplant perfusion machines, and really using the diseased human liver itself as a model to study diseased human liver. And we think that's a very elegant way to try and improve the translation crisis that affected liver disease. And then the last big challenge that we set out to address, which is a slightly more nuanced one for those who are new to the drug development space, is that clinical trials are a really tricky subject, and you have to be thoughtful about what are the endpoints that you can actually measure that are going to be really meaningful to confirming that your drug is effective in a relatively short period of time with a relatively low amount of investment required. So rather than trying to run a fatty liver disease trial or a chronic disease trial, which would take you years and cost tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to do at scale, we looked for diseases where we could get into the clinic relatively quickly and run relatively short, fast trials so that we can prove to investors that, hey, we really have a drug that works here because it's worked in this subset of patients. And therefore, if we can show that, and we'll be able to raise additional capital to take the same medicine into larger trials. So we've centered a lot of our research around liver transplantation. It's an area where there's been a dearth of investment, a dearth of innovation for a long, long time because it's seen as a small market opportunity, but it's a great place to get started, to make an impact, and then to use that impact as stepping stone into more ambitious, larger, and more challenging clinical trials like a NASH indication or fatty liver disease indication, which affects a huge portion of the general public today. So that was a lot of information. Hopefully I haven't scared off half of your listeners with that intro, but I'm happy to take it in whatever direction you guys would like.
That was brilliant, Jack. Thank you so much. And thank you for clarifying a lot of things that I really read a lot before we started this podcast, but really clarified everything. Thank you. So would like to know more about what inspired you to particularly focus on liver disease and its challenges, and maybe what are the main reasons you decided to co-found your company?
Yeah, that's a fun one. I guess. So my personal journey was that I originally studied biomedical engineering. I was always a healthcare focused person, even as sort of a young, sprightly young lad in Ireland. I was always interested in how the body works. How do we improve human health? It's a very noble cause. So I studied biomedical engineering, and then I was going down went into the US where a lot of the kind of startup innovation activity was happening, and worked for a couple of early stage companies across health technology, med tech, even did a stint in health insurance. But then I ended up in biotech, largely by happenstance and by good fortune, to be quite honest. But my experience in biotech was really sort of like a wow. I worked on a product that was essentially a curative treatment for children who were born with a terminal disease. So it was just profound. It's almost like magic. I remember talking to my mother back in Ireland about this crazy thing I was working on, and it's hard to really conceptualize how transformative that is for the families and the people affected and everything else. So following that experience, I was like, well, this is a really impactful space to work in. It's so technical and so much depth of expertise required, but when it works, it really works, and it really changes lives in a way that it's hard to do with a digital health tool or otherwise, which are also important. But I just thought this sector had something really meaningful to it. So when I moved out of the US. Then I had been there a long time, and there's a rule they say in Ireland, a lot of Irish immigrants end up in the US, that you either stay for 3 or 30 years, you don't stay in between. And I've been there 6, and I was like, okay, if I don't get out now, I'm never going to get out of here, and I'll start sounding American, and I'll have kids who sound American, and it'll be my whole life. So I was like, okay, I need to run. So I moved to the UK, and I met a guy by the name of Quinn Wills in London, who had spent his career really in liver disease. He was a long-time veteran of drug discovery and technology, and applying technology to drug discovery, particularly around liver, which is such a central node of so much of our own systemic health. And I think that I didn't really know a lot about the liver, being completely honest. Like Quinn used to take me down to the pub on a Friday evening to give me a pint of science and a lecture on how the liver worked and how different, the role it played. So I was really a newbie, a novice. But the more I read about the disease area, just the scale of the problem, like we don't talk about it very often, but it actually does. It is the third leading cause of premature death in most of the industrialized world. And we hear a lot about cancer, we hear a lot about heart disease, and those are big problems, but liver disease is right up there with them, and nobody talks about it. And everyone sort of puts it in this like it slightly reduces the gravity of the disease because they think of it akin to like a self-inflicted drinking issue, which very rarely is. It's often genetics and a lifestyle, and you have socioeconomic factors. Anyway, so I having come from that experience where I was working in the US, and I was really inspired by what the product we launched could do. I couldn't help but go, this is a $2 million drug, and most of the world is never going to be able to be prescribed such a like highly valuable and difficult and complex molecule. And I was thinking, I'd love to work on something that, even though that's an amazing product and we need treatments for rare disease, and like, don't get me wrong, I think it was an inspiring project, but I was also thinking, I'd love to work on something that is like very widely accessible, that really changes the course of disease for a huge number of people, rather than a very Western product. So anyway, I just thought chronic liver disease really was like something that I felt was worth just dedicating a huge amount of time and energy to, just given how prevalent it is, and how, if you can really crack it, just given the scale of the disease, and especially the type of drug that we're developing or can be manufactured at scale, you could make a product that's widely accessible to the majority of people around the world. But obviously the science has to work and everything else. So anyway, that was some of the thoughts that went into my move back to the UK and the launch of Ochre Bio. And yeah, here we are now, many moons later.
Wow, that's very inspiring, Jack. I mean, you've talked about your journey, your background, your education, your whole career pathway, and how that led you to basically found Ochre Bio. And I truly believe this is a very inspiring journey for all of us. What I would like to do now, and I know it may be a little bit tricky, because my background is medicine. So I'm bringing this to myself, but I would like you to tell us more about Ochre Bio's deep phenotyping platform. Precision RNA medicine, and all the other key components in research and development. What is it that makes Ochre Bio so special?
Yeah, so I'll try and tie it back to why we pieced the technologies that we pieced together in the way that we did, so that all kind of, each of them addresses a certain challenge. So deep phenotyping is essentially our approach to discovery. We think in order to really better understand the progression of such a complex, multicellular, nuanced disease like liver disease, it's not enough to just sequence or take the genomics of a population and look for different genetic variations across the population. It's a very heterogeneous disease. There's a lot of lifestyle influences and epigenetic factors and so forth. So in order to try and study the complexity in a way that's tractable, what we do is we take samples of liver disease at different stages of the disease process, and we use advanced genomic tools like spatial sequencing or single cell sequencing, where we actually annotate using an imaging AI tool. So we take a picture of the disease sample, and then we go, where in this sample is more or less disease, because it tends to sprout up in different sections. And we'll go, oh, there's a pretty fibrotic or a more advanced stage of the disease, and we'll zoom in, and then we'll sequence at that part of the tissue and compare it to the healthy part of the tissue next door. So your donor is your own control in a way, and say what transcriptomically is upregulated in this more diseased segment that might be driving the disease process and could be a druggable RNA or a druggable target that we can treat with GalNAc siRNA, which is the modality. And I'm getting a little bit technical here, but it's we can get siRNA, so an RNA silencing molecule, into hepatocytes, which are the main cell in the liver. That's where we can, that's our target. That's our pointed gun to address disease-causing genes. So we look for genes in those cells that seem to be associated with the progression of the disease and therefore could be really relevant therapeutic targets. And then we use things like single cell sequencing to make sure they're largely active in hepatocytes, and that's the cells that was driving the biology. And we also try and do things like single cell CRISPR, where we'll knock them out in cells and then study how that changes the phenotype of the disease. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit technical here, but all that to say, it's basically a technology to zoom in and really at a molecular and a phenotypic, as a histological, using loads of technical terms, basically zoom in on the disease tissue and say, what's going on here and how do we treat it? So that's step one. Step two, okay, we have an idea for what are the potentially disease-causing transcripts. We've gotten a lot of data. We've done a lot of analytical work. We've used all the latest and greatest in computational approaches to say, we think this is a potential target. So from there, we'll go into the lab. We'll have our chemistry team design an siRNA. So this is basically a matching sequence. So once we know the RNA that seems to be associated with the disease, we design an siRNA, which basically just interferes or knocks out that disease-causing gene. It takes us a while to do that because you have to manufacture tons of different sequences to knock down this particular RNA, and then you test them all and you see which one did the best job at really shutting it down. Then once you get one you really like, you stick a GalNAc on it, which is a sugar that the liver loves, because the liver is like, it filters everything through your blood and soaks up a lot of metabolites and nutrients. So it loves this sugar called GalNAc. So you stick that onto the drug and then it goes right to where you want it. It's like a honing missile to the hepatocyte to say, you are going to deliver this drug, this target killing RNA to this specific cell type and at this particular kinetics in order to knock down the gene that we've addressed has a potentially therapeutic effect or is causing the disease in somehow. So that's what I mean by precision RNA. And then I think the last piece of our spiel is the human-centric translational models. So maybe take a step back here. I know I'm doing a lot of science here now, but traditionally, when people made drugs, they have to test them in mice because mice, we assume, have a pretty consistent or relative human or physiology to humans. Now, that was largely driven by a number of toxicology scandals in the late 19th century in the FDA, late 20th century, like the late 1950s, 60s, 70s, because people were taking drugs and putting them into humans that weren't properly tested. So it was largely a safety rationale. But as we've learned over the last number of decades, as we got more sophisticated as a sector, we know these don't tell us very much about chronic disease. They're good for things like infection or more generic immune causing diseases because they're similar immune systems to us. But when it comes to a chronic disease, when you've worn your liver down through decades of abuse or decades of eating and drinking too much, that is a very human experience. It's not something a mouse really does. Its metabolic system doesn't really have the same quirks as ours does. So anyway, all that to say, rather than going to mice testing, we go into actual diseased organs. We take organs, as I mentioned at the beginning, that can't be used for transplant because they're fatty or early fibrosis or too old and so forth. And then we'll keep them alive for 5+ days on these machines outside the body, sort of like a pumping of blood and oxygen and dialysis and sort of making the liver think it's in a human. And then we dose it with our medicine and see, ooh, how's the liver doing? Is it improving due to the introduction of our medicine, or is it as was previously? And that's the last sort of big scientific innovation behind our approach. But each of them addresses some of the challenges that I mentioned at the beginning. I got a little bit technical there. Hopefully, now I definitely have scared off at least 75% of your audience, I suspect.
No, we love technical. My background is also biomedical engineering, so I absolutely love this. This is a crash course and everything I need to know. So thank you so much. Yeah. So I would like to
definitely
know.
very passionate and definitely very passionate about it. Can I just add, Jack?
Thank you so much, Jack. Yeah. So we all kind of experienced in research and development in any field that there are so many obstacles and challenging that you're experiencing throughout that pathway. So can you discuss maybe something that your company was going through? How did you overcome that? And like, what was the main learnings out of it? And as entrepreneurs, we absolutely love mistakes because then we learn and then we know how to fix it the next time. So I think there's no embarrassment or anything like that. So anything you're comfortable with
Yeah,
sharing.
no, absolutely. I mean, I think that's probably a good lesson for any aspiring entrepreneurs out there is every challenge is a education, is an opportunity to reframe your perspective on things and grow and develop. So the one that comes to mind is a very particular one to our company, but there may be lessons learned in therein. So when we set up the business, we had the same founding thesis that I just walked you through. The operational challenge or the logistical challenge of operationalizing this founding thesis was that sourcing and maintaining diseased donor organs that had just been rejected in a transplant center and getting them to a place where we could keep them alive and sustain them was a real hurdle for us. And what we did at the beginning was we thought, okay, well, the obvious thing to do here is let's partner with all of the transplant centers where these organs are being rejected and are coming to anyway, and let's be on site there and have surgeons participate in the research and so forth. Unfortunately, the learning from that was that transplant surgeons are very busy people and they don't really want to do preclinical research. They think they want to do and they aspire to, but when it comes to the crunch, they can't, or they just will not be able to prioritize this over all of their other duties. And even though they may verbalize it and feel like that was something they would like to aspire to, but being a business, you cannot miss deadlines and you have explicit commitments to your investor base to say, I said I'm going to do this by this date, so I have to do it. Whereas in a transplant surgeon academic partnership, that was just not the case. So what we did, and we made a pretty abrupt decision, and it was one of the things actually when we did our Series A, a lot of our seed investors referenced as like a example of good leadership or good decision making, which is, I think, critical to success as an entrepreneur. Was we said, okay, we're going to shut down all 10 partnerships that we spent years developing and getting through legal and drafting and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to just build our own site in the US and partner with large organ procurement organizations so we can source discarded donor tissue and run it ourselves. And then we'll just hire transplant surgeons in who have no other responsibilities, who aren't working an actual clinical role in parallel, or just focus on this research, and they're going to run it themselves. And then we'll have a much higher quality, we'll have much higher predictability of the throughput and how we can plan our experimental workflows. We'll also have a much higher quality system because we'll know they're doing it the same way. Each surgeon doesn't have their own quirky ideas. Everyone's doing it according to the protocol that we laid out, and we're going to do it that way. And that has been one of the most effective pivots, as it were, of our company, because we were really predicating the whole scientific thesis on this idea that human organs are better than mice for predicting clinical success. And without the ability to really predictably do that type of research, we were just missing deadlines, and we were going to have a real, it wasn't going to end well for anyone. So so that was I guess the education, the lesson there is that once something's not working, you need to make the decision. You need to make it quickly. You need to make it pretty completely. It's a half decision where it's like, well, maybe we'll start to tinker over here, but we'll keep everything going. Then we would just burned more cash and ultimately made the decision anyway, just a year later, and then be in a much worse position. So I think there is real value in decisive. I mean, it's actually paramount to success, I would say, as an entrepreneur, is being able to make those tough calls and make them resolutely. Because you don't know what you don't know, and there's always an if, but, or then, and that's the nature of this job, really.
That is a really good one, because I think as an entrepreneur, like decision making that I had to make like day to day was incredible, and I would never ever expect something like that. So I think that was a really important point that you emphasized there.
Yeah, and look, I think the other challenge is, as a human, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. You want to be like, oh, if I just give them a little bit more time, they'll get on track and it'll be fine. And that's a good way to live your life. But in business, you really can't make that call, because the reality is they may have the best intentions, but they may just not be in a position to deliver. And then you end up really damaging your own potential by virtue of that. So I think it's, and you can, and nobody really, you know, we're all still friends. We're all the transplant surgeons were understanding, but it was a good education that you got to make those tough calls pretty early.
Absolutely, absolutely, Zach. I really like this example about, and also being a clinician myself, I can definitely understand, all these struggles, managing competing agendas and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I really like your, how you stressed it, that, this is, we're talking about a business that has deadlines, etc. So, things need to run as well. Which actually makes me it generates a new question to me about another topic that really bothers us as entrepreneurs and basically about funding. So can you basically remember maybe in the beginning, the first steps, basically when you started with Ochre Bio, any how did you get around this challenge about with funding, which I know troubles many of the new startups and entrepreneurs? Was there anything in particular that you would advise somebody who's starting now with regards to that potentially?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And I think it's one of these things that there's no obvious answer. I mean, I think there's a few probably lessons learned. So I'll just give our journey, and hopefully I'll try and summarize what I learned from our journey in the background. So for us, we started trying to raise money initially around Europe, and found we were kind of getting nowhere fast because it was a novel idea, and we were kind of non-traditional archetype for the company we were trying to build, and so on and so forth. So what we did an accelerator program, Entrepreneur First. They gave us a little bit of money to get started, and then we actually jumped ship and did Y Combinator, which is a great opportunity for the company. And the lesson from Y Combinator is maybe relevant in that what Y Combinator does really well is a very simple concept, but basically what they do is they keep all these companies that they've now decided are interesting and promising, and they don't let them talk to investors for 3 months. And then on one day, they release all these companies into the wild, and there's like this flurry of activity where investors are really there's a sense of competition because they're all just beginning to fundraise at the same time. So then everyone is actively trying to speak to you, and there's a lot of like quick decision making as a result. And through that process, we were able to generate enough competitive intensity to get a term sheet from a large US investor. And then having got that validation, we were able to go back to some of the European investors who we've been talking to at the beginning and sort of shop around this new validation. And then all of a sudden we had lots of interest from them, and then we could use that to negotiate a sort of a favorable terms for the initial seed raise. And I think the lesson there is, don't be, this is a YC message, but you're not only fundraise when you're fundraising. If you're not fundraising, be building. And if you're not building, be fundraising. And try not to do them at the same time, because you create a lot of the key you want to a successful fundraise is to get enough momentum or competitive intensity that drives someone to put in a term sheet. The hardest part of a fundraise is getting anyone to put in a lead term sheet, because every investor wants more time to see who's going to move and how this company's going to do. And you're working in the unknown. Nobody really knows if the technology at a very early stage is going to be the big success that everyone wants. So there's a lot of sort of posturing around, do I have to make a decision? I could just ask for a little bit more data. You're a little bit early. Come back to me. You're a little bit more mature. That's the kind of the go-to line from an investor. And then as the entrepreneur, you're going, how do I make this person make a decision? Because or else everyone's going to sit on the sidelines and wait for someone to get involved. And the best way to do that is to try and have a lot of interest in parallel, and then be in sort of this position of self-confidence that I have a lot of people looking. If you wait, you're not going to be able to get in the round because we got a lot of other interests. Not as brash as that, but you can sort of begin to assert that type of energy, and then ultimately I think that helps to catalyze someone putting in the lead term sheet. And then when you have the lead term sheet, it's so great. It's such a nice time. It's such a great position to be in, because then you can go back to everyone else and say, I have a lead. You're in or you're out. We got to make a decision. We're going to close as quickly as possible because we need to get back to work. This is a waste of time. And then from there, you can sort of catalyze more interest and help to drive the outcome that you're looking to get from the financing. So I don't know if that's useful, but I think if you're always fundraising, which is a tendency in an early stage company, because you're always looking at your runway and going, I wish I had more runway. This is stressful. But to the extent that you can delineate between, I'm focused on science, I'm focused on data, I'm focused on building the company, then get that data in hand and then go, okay, now I'm going to go full steam ahead to fundraise. I'm going to talk to every investor. I'm going to be extremely elegant in how I plan it. I'm going to stage my conversation such that I begin with the least important, get my question and get my sort of flow down, then do the slightly more important. And then by the time I'm pitching the really big investors that I really want, I've already got interest, I've already got momentum, and I'm really in a strong position to have those more challenging conversations. And sort of setting the framework, having a process is key. And then being in a position to actually present something scientifically that's meaningful is sort of the most important thing. And then always raise a little bit more than you need if you can. I think that's a good rule of thumb, because you always spend more than you think you're going to spend, even if you're the best financial planner in the world. It always takes a little bit longer and a little bit more money than you hoped it would. So yeah, I don't know if that's useful, but hopefully.
That is very useful. And I think especially in companies where you have a lot of R&D happening, it's very hard to kind of like separate the funding and the like development, and it kind of like all goes together, and those are still like smaller teams and everything else. So I think that's a really, really good point there. So yeah. But I'll get you back to a bit more technical side. So I'm really interested about the accessibility and sort of like the impact innovation. So by making therapies accessible to patients everywhere is absolutely the most important thing for almost every biomedical engineering company. So I just want to know more about like, how are you achieving these goals these days? How do you make sure that it's accessible to everyone who need it?
Yeah, I mean, this is the challenge with the field we work in, is that it's healthcare is basically driven by the financial ecosystem that we all live in. So a lot of the big money emanates in the US, and a lot of the reimbursement emanates in the US. Is this like gravitational pull towards the US. But then as a company, if you have an ambition to develop medicines as equitably as possible, you need to kind of integrate that into your strategy early on. Like the example I gave at the beginning, if you're developing a gene therapy product, and I worked in the manufacturing of these gene therapy products, and they're just so expensive to make. They're incredibly capital intensive. Like the equipment and even the disposable equipment that you use, there's like tens, if not hundreds of thousands per manufacturing run. So the cost of the goods alone, let alone the return that the investors are going to be pushing you for, is so high that it's really hard to envision that being widely accessible in parts of the developing world in the near term, until there's a lot more progress technically to bring down the cost of goods for mass production of these types of products. So that's a space that the reality is going to be difficult. It's just not going to be viable for large portions of the global population for a while, and that's really, really unfortunate. But there needs to be more technology and innovation to drive down the cost, so that it can be more widely accessible. Whereas in our case, we're using a product that's manufacturable at scale at a relatively low cost, and it's going after an indication that's widely distributed across the world. So the strategy for the company is essentially equitable access, is in essence in a much more pronounced way than the previous example, inbuilt into the strategy. Now, the reality of the sector we work in is finance will pull you in certain places. So you'll end up launching in the US probably a year before you launch in Europe, and then launching in Asia probably a year after that. And there will be like nuances that are difficult, that are just the challenge, but you can build it into the corporate strategy of the organization, that equitable access and concurrent launches and whatever you can do to sort of shape your strategy around that will help to mitigate that imbalance that is the really unfortunate reality of the world that we live in. Anyway, I don't know if that helps. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of context on how I think about it. But it is the perennial challenge of our industry. It's the reason why our industry is so, it gets so much justifiable. Well, it's just the reality. It's just the reality of healthcare's intersection with capitalism, and it's really unfortunate. It's just a really tough challenge to try to solve. Like I had a meeting with the minister for the NHS yesterday, with the Minister of Health, who's does a lot of work with the NHS, and it is, no matter in any context, whether it's drug development or hospital care or even access to more basic nursing services, it is the perennial challenge of how do you maximize access to as many people as possible while realizing the constraints of the environment within which you work. So anyway, it's something that we continue to try and think about innovative solutions to, but are also just challenged by it.
Yeah, but we have people like yourself that are working on it, and for sure the situation will get only better from this point on. So I'm being very positive, but I really believe in that. Yeah.
But I think it is, I think even over the last 20 years, you've seen this massive acceleration of global health, of more market access work around the world, of lower cost medicine. There has been a lot of effort, particularly by groups like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and others, to drive funding into even areas of medicine that have traditionally been underserved. So there is progress, but it's, the arc of progress is slow, but bends in the right direction. We hope.
Absolutely. It's so nice to see, people with this vision and, incorporating these ethical aspects in their company's vision, Jack. It's truly inspiring. Well, I would like you to move to another part, basically, because we are part of an innovators community ourselves, and we are focusing basically on connecting, stakeholders in healthcare, and fostering, this communication between startups and companies. We truly believe that collaborations, communities, partnerships do play a significant role in advancing research and achieving, our goals as corporations or startups. Can you tell us an example, maybe, of basically a partnership that you have encountered and has truly impacted your pathway, Jack?
Yeah, well, I think partnerships can take multiple different forms. We've done a couple of large we do one large pharma partnership that was very catalytic from a financing perspective, because people saw a lot of validation in the ability for a small company to partner with a big company early on in our journey. But sometimes the partnerships that are the most impactful, at least on my journey, have been mentors that have really helped partner with me and help develop me as a leader within the context of my role as the founder and CEO of the company. And I've been very fortunate to have a few who have really taken the time to walk through difficult situations or complex scenarios and try to help me think through what is the right behavior to get the best outcome of this particular moment in time. And having someone to bounce ideas off, and even both peer mentors and people who've done it before, can be a really, really valuable partnership for an early stage entrepreneur. I think it's particularly if it's your first time out the gate, it's critical, I would say, to be open and to surround yourself by people who've done it before. Well, we've both done it before, but also in the trenches at the same time as you, so you can bounce ideas off of and share lessons learned. Because a lot of even though your individual technology and situation is quite unique, a lot of the realities of company building are even sector agnostic to a degree. A lot of it's people management, keeping an eye on the finances, making sure you're sort of thinking long term and getting the strategy and the long term vision matched up together, and all those challenges. It's oftentimes very helpful to have an impartial, thoughtful, empathetic personality to brainstorm with. So I think probably the more impactful partnerships, even beyond the corporate ones, have been the personal or interpersonal ones that I've developed through this journey. And I'm so grateful for a lot of people that I've met. That's one of the real, probably underappreciated benefits of starting a company, is you get to meet these amazing, super smart, interesting, oftentimes very kind people along the way. And you also meet some people who are less on that side of the spectrum, but that's an education too, So hopefully that's useful.
And that is very true. But I think you also get to meet like absolutely amazing and brilliant people and learn something super useful. So it's always both parts of spectrum for sure. So I'm wondering, for like looking into the future, what is your vision and what is the role of advancing liver disease treatment from your perspective, and where do you see yourself in, I don't know, 10 years?
10 years. That is a hard one.
We can put
I
it as
have
5 years as well.
well, oh, no, it's a good question. I mean, I would love for this company to really be a beacon of entrepreneurial energy on this side of the pond. You know, we've built a lot of great biotech companies in the US, a lot of the newer ones like Alnylam, Vertex, Moderna, Biogen, all of those companies. Actually, some of the original science was European, but a lot of the sort of scale capital and scale executives and everything else emanate out of the East Coast or West Coast of the US. And I think Europe has this rich heritage in phenomenal scientific research. A lot of the foundational scientific pillars of the biotech ecosystem came from European universities, but then the Americans run it to the finish line. And I'm like, why can't we build these type of ambitious, globally relevant companies on this side of the pond? Yeah, so I would love for us to continue to be a business, number one, be a much larger organization, number two, and have multiple products in the clinic or through the clinic and actually on moving into commercial phases. I mean, we'll be thoughtful about our partnering strategy to your question earlier, and some of the indications we're looking at are not necessarily tractable to a small company, at least in the next couple of years. But if we can see some success and really demonstrate this thesis that advanced genomics underpinned with all the latest computational tools plus human-centric translational models does improve the probability of success for new medicines, we can build a pipeline of products and really put European science on the map, as it were. So that would be the vision. Now, of course, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the head, Mike Tyson once said. So we'll see how things materialize, but it's nice to have a North Star that we're striving for in developing a portfolio of medicines for advanced and earlier stages of liver disease.
And disclaimer, I will use the word, but like, do you think AI will impact this in any way?
Well, look, I mean, I was thinking about this yesterday, because I was getting some grief on Twitter off someone about AIs, or the big incumbents are going to continue to be the incumbents, and they're acquiring all of the AI technology that they needed. And I kind of going, if I'm, a lot of these, pharma is always 20 years behind every other sector, first of all. So a lot of the digitization that has just been the nature of modern business has been slow to infiltrate the pharmaceutical sector. I think there's probably a few reasons for that. It's the data and the data that we have within drug development today is probably not very well annotated to be amenable to a lot of these new AI tools. The iteration cycles are inherently very slow because they actually prove that your models are telling you anything useful. If you're tested in humans, and that takes a long time, and it's very invariably quite complex, and the data can be quite noisy. But with the emergence of these new advanced technologies, I kind of have the general gut feeling that the smaller companies are going to be smarter at integrating them into their discovery and development pipelines than the much larger, much more entrenched organizations trying to pull them into very old systems, very old processes and ways of doing things. So I do think over the next decade or two, there will be a kind of a reckoning within the pharmaceutical sector. It'll take a lot longer because, as I said, it's hard to prove that these tools are really improving the efficiency of drug development until you're actually in the clinic. But as we start to see things emerge or see things progress, it'll be interesting to see how it does influence the development of the sector at large. And for us, in our case, absolutely. I mean, we're a data company more than a pharma company. We like to think of ourselves as. We do a lot of a lot of our discovery is all driven by pretty hypothesis-free data interrogation in a very well and elegantly curated way, I would argue. So AI is definitely going to play a role for companies who have very rich repositories of data sets tied to disease processes, and hopefully will ultimately lead us to a lot more new cures. I think that's one of the things. Like, I was at a talk recently and someone was like, what has AI actually done for pharma? And I was kind of going, yeah, what has it done? Like we've got a few molecules in the clinic now, but they're really like redeveloped new ligands for well-known targets, and they're in pretty competitive spaces. Like, no one has really fundamentally opened up a new disease area through AI, or a new foundational biological insight through AI yet. And you think about like immuno-oncology, the idea that the immune system can fight cancer was like just such a massive like light bulb for pharmaceuticals, and it fueled this whole immuno-oncology space. And that was like, that's done amazing things for cancer treatment and amazing things for human health. And so far, AI has given us like slightly better drugs that we already had, or that we were already developing anyway. So like, I think when the moment that people are going to go, holy shit, this is real, is when we start seeing these AI drug discovery companies go, I have a fundamental new pathway, or like a really novel biological insight that just is like way out of left field, but is having a really, really consistent therapeutic effect. And that's kind of hard to tell how far that is away. But then I think people will start to go, oh, holy shit, old school pharma, this is how pharma should be done. Like, and maybe it makes us better at doing clinical trials, or better at like matching the right drugs to the right patients. And I think that's probably where it'll start. But yeah, anyway, it's just I think it's a really interesting topic to ponder on.
Absolutely agree, Jack. And I can tell, I've said it before, but I can definitely see, your passion and clear vision through your answers. So it's really, motivates me as well personally, and I'm sure a lot of our basically people in the audience. So I'd like to ask the next question. Actually, what is it that motivates you to go to work every morning, and what advice would you give to someone pursuing a similar career to yours?
Look, I think as I said, I think working in healthcare is such a privilege in a lot of ways, because you do have this, because it's a hard job. You get punched in the head so much, yeah, not physically but emotionally. like you're trying to like get people on the same page. They're all telling you that, and they're and trying to get people to give you money, and it's just a really tough, stressful job. And then it can all go south really surprising ways, and you kind of are on your toes a lot, and it's like you kind of get numb to the stress eventually, and it sort of becomes more anyway. So in order to motivate one to continue to get punched in the head day in day out for years and years and years on end, I think it's nice to work in a sector where if you're successful, there is like a much greater than thou sort of outcome at the end of the road for people who are affected by disease. And I mean, and then you have these moments where, like, I was at home recently, my friend died of liver disease, and it was just like this is meant, it makes it all really feel much more real, the work that you do day in and day out. And then you're going, I'm having to fight this person, or this is really annoying me, but at the end of the day, doesn't really matter if I don't like this or you don't like that color of the website, whatever. It's it's all about a much more important goal. So I think that is, or I feel very fortunate to work in a sector where that is the reality. And I mean, nothing against the tech sector, but why would you optimize back-end SaaS if you can make life-changing medicines? I'm only joking. I just think it's crazy the amount of money that goes into tech by comparison to the amount of money that goes into biotech. It's literally like David and Goliath amounts of capital, but yet we're the ones keeping us alive. Anyway, that's what motivates me. And then advice, I would say, I mean, that's one of the elements. Motivation is like a multifactorial thing. I love working with smart people. I love challenges. I love trying to I'm kind of competitive by nature to a degree, so I really want to like push European science forward and take on the Americans, and all those things are like part of my psyche, probably to some degree. But the tactical advice I would have to others in this game is a good, healthy sense of paranoia. I think actually kept me going for a long time early on in the journey. Like, I think you don't know what you don't know, and like the reality is, especially if you're going to try and get into biotech, it's such a hard game, and it's so dominated by like old school pharma people, and they're looking at you like you don't know what you're in for. And then you're going, I actually don't know what I'm in for, but I'm going to try it anyway. And then I think what like really kept me on my toes for the first few years was like, I was so paranoid. I was like, they all know way more than I know. I'm gonna have to work way harder. I'm gonna have to like ask for advice off everyone and get loads of input to make these decisions. Because I was probably, I guess part of that is like having the humility to go, I'm not that smart, and I really am way less experienced than a lot of people in the sector. So how do I catch up with them, or how do I get like a an ability to really perform at a high level in a really complex industry that is entrenched and has a lot of old school ways of doing things. So I think the ability to ask for help, be self-aware and humble, and like ask for, and don't that's important if you're going to really try and get people behind you. I think that actually is like one of the key things, especially if you're not that experienced. It's critical. And enjoy the journey as well. Like, as I said, you are going to get punched in the head a lot, and that's going to be uncomfortable and make you feel sad. but then you got to be like, well, it's a good life story as well. I'll have some good tales to tell when I'm retired in some country pub and back arse of Kerry. I don't know. So yeah, I hopefully that's useful.
That sounds amazing. Jack, thank you so much for all the insights and everything that you taught us in this very short couple of minutes. And especially thank you so much for your honesty. Like, it really, really means a lot. And I think especially our listeners are going to appreciate it. So yeah, thank you so much. Now it's more of a free time. So anything you'd like to add, or we didn't ask you in particular and you would like to mention? You can also tell us a joke. That's also acceptable.
A good joke. What a good jokes have I got? I'm fresh out of jokes today. Look, I guess I think more people should work in this sector. I think it's a really important sector. I think it's a really complex, like, as we talked about, like the intersection between capitalism, healthcare is inherently uncomfortable and difficult, but at the end of the road, there's this really amazing, profound impact you can have on human health. I think we need more smart, empathetic, kind people in this industry. I think it does attract because there's a lot of money in this space. It does attract sometimes people with the wrong motives, and I would like to see more passionate people in the field trying to solve these complex issues, because they are very difficult to figure out. We do operate in a really difficult industry, so pulling in more motivated folks will be ultimately a good thing for human health, and having more honest, hard conversations about the realities of the work that we do. Yeah, that's my only plug. And then liver disease, look after your liver. Get your liver enzymes tested. Tell your parents to do so as well. The risk of liver disease goes up inherently with age. My dad loves a bottle of wine. I'm always like, Paul, I gotta get those liver enzymes tested, but they're always really good. So I'm like, you have an unbelievable liver. We need to sequence your liver and figure out how to cure disease as a result. But yeah, look after your liver, love your liver, and get involved in healthcare. It's good, noble cause.
Visit community.eithealth.eu to join our community and shape the healthcare landscape with us. For more such videos, subscribe to our channel.